Starting off. Oh, that's a fun. Okay, I love
That's
it.
Cameo for those that haven't played with Cameo yet.
I was wondering how that was going to work. This is a
Yeah.
very cool feature. So, I am very pleased to announce our speaker for today, Catherine Haynes from All Printing Resources. She is one of my biggest role models in our industry, and I'm very happy that you are speaking on this today. So, Kat is the VP of Growth and Development for APR. She's been in the industry for 25 years plus in flexo and printing. She is a fellow Clemson grad. Go Tigers. Yep. She's a part of APR's technical solutions group, and she has a lot of experience and knowledge around um, basically all things flexo, truly. All printing resources, right? All of them.
Right.
Very technically savvy as well. She's a G7 expert. She's first certified, and she is the most jacked woman in Flexo. She's a fitness instructor. And if you've been to any of the FTA's events in the last couple of years, you've probably seen something from Kat Haynes. She has been involved with a variety of different industry committees throughout Flexo and printing, and she's a very regular presenter. So Kat, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will hand it over to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things that I'm doing today that are a little bit different than what I've done before with some of these virtuals is I'm using Cameo, this thing right here. So that's like a new feature some of you may have played with already. My first time today, so hopefully it goes okay and it's not weird, but I feel like, sometimes it's nice to be able to see the presenter, even though you should also have the ability to go up into, I think it's usually the upper right side of most screens where you can access and change what view you have. So if you like to see presenters, you can do the side by side and all that good stuff too. All right. So my discussion today is about success in a male-dominated workforce, and not so much, just finding success, on some small scale, but really, how can you thrive and how can you really try to stand out in the workforce that you're in? So, a couple of things. I'm going to ask you guys to use your chat window. And in fact, I'm going to activate my chat just so that I can see what you guys are saying as we go through this. But if you haven't already made chat active, if you just click on it, it should be part of your window, or it should expand as like a separate window, depending on what kind of setup you have. So go ahead and do that now so that you can quickly type things in as we go through this. Now, what I thought would be good to start with is to, really step back and let's just kind of look under the covers and understand, where do you see yourself in your workforce, in your place of work? Some of you, does this resonate for some of you? Like when you think about yourself at your job, do you feel like one of many, a number? And again, use the chat. So you could just say yes, or you can throw, your hands up. I can't really see, I don't think I can see presenter emotions, or reactions, but if you use the chat, I just want to make sure it works. So use chat, please. I'm looking. Yes, nobody feels this way. Brad, would I be able to see everybody chat if they're responding? You'd
Yes, you
have to
would.
reply,
Here they
I'm
come.
seeing some come in. Yeah. Cool. Oh, did it your previous company? Anna says sometimes, sure. And some of you, maybe if you don't feel like one of many, one of very few, or kind of lost in that crowd, maybe you feel more like this. And I think in a post-COVID workforce, maybe some of us that were not remote before, now in these remote situations, this may be something that you're feeling, where sometimes you feel on the flip side, you feel isolated, you feel unseen. You feel it's not hard to stand out because there's so many people, but it's hard to stand out because you're so isolated in your situation. Does this resonate for anybody? Again, use the chat. Maybe if you're new to it. Now, I've been doing technical services, and so I've worked remote for 25 plus years now. Well, I guess 20 years now. And so if you've been in a job where you were remote before, maybe it doesn't feel any different to you. But certainly for those that are new to the remote workforce, I could see this being one of those things that challenges you. Oh, that's nice. So Claudia is saying that as a manager and director, we have weekly drumbeat to connect with the team, which is fantastic. That's a great way in a remote type situation to find some connection with your colleagues. But ultimately, it's not just about, where you are in this. It's about trying to figure out, how can I make sure I'm being seen? How can I feel like I'm being heard? Really, I want to feel like I'm standing out in this workforce. So whether you're in either one of those scenarios, how can you, really get to that point? How can you stand out? And, before we jump to, I guess the approach of pointing fingers and finding why you can't in looking in other places, I recommend first looking inward, right? First taking a step back and looking at, what are the things that maybe you're doing that actually are holding you back from feeling seen and being heard. Moving my chat out of the way so that I can see my screen better. And so when I look at this whole looking inward, I really kind of focus in on two specific things. One of those being your self-talk. What are the things that are kind of rolling around in your head? And I think this is a pretty big one. The self-talk, how you coach yourself, what do you say to yourself in certain situations? How do you motivate yourself, or in many cases, demotivate yourself? So I'm reading the chat right now. Are you making some statements, Emily, about the chat not working?
I'm just seeing from my end that I'm only able to send messages to host and panelists. So I just wanted to make sure that I'd be able to share those links later on with everyone.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I will fix that.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that. Yeah, so self-talk. What are some examples of negative self-talk? Things, and these can be things, and again, I want you to use the chat. I'm really encouraging you guys to participate today. So using the self-chat, just throw in some ideas that you have. Maybe these are things that you've said to yourself, or you've heard your friends say, or your kids say to themselves, or maybe they're things that you've read about. You're not as good as the other employee, Katie says. That's a good one. Anybody else want to throw some things out there? I don't know what I'm talking about. That would be one that what if I don't know, what's another good, somebody throw some more ideas out there for us. Someone else could do it better, Ellen said. Feeling like you don't deserve a seat at the table, that's a fantastic one, Ashton. Katie, maybe they know better, right? So anything that's just holding you back, maybe, maybe if you don't have the degree in whatever it's talking about, maybe I don't really know what I'm talking about. I'm too much for people. Alyssa, that's an interesting one. Like maybe I know you can't use your mic right now, but that's a pretty interesting one. Like maybe you're over talking. I don't know if I interpret what you're saying. Maybe you're going to say maybe you're over enthusiastic, or I don't know. That's an interesting one. I'm too soft. Like maybe too easy. That's the one that Christine put in there. Yeah, so Alyssa's saying, yeah, too much expression. I'm over the top, too pushy. Katie, that's a good one, right? So there's anything that's holding you back from really trying to say what it is that you want to say, or, speak up or look to being seen. Now that's one. And the second one that I want to bring up is self-accountability. So these are two things I feel like really hold us back from really becoming seen and heard. And so I'm going to give you a couple examples of self-accountability, and I'm going to step out of the world of printing and flexo and all of that, and look at a couple of examples. And these are personal. Every year I make the same resolution to become more organized. That's what I'm going to do every single year. And January kicks off, and I have this goal, and I set a plan in place. I tell myself what I'm going to do. And then the second week of January comes by, and things didn't quite happen, but next week I got it. And before I know it, January is gone and February's rolling in, and I'm still not really achieving any of the goals that I've set out. And honestly, here I am in November, and guess what resolution I'm going to have next January? It's going to be, I'm going to get more organized. I'm going to clean my office up and get my paperwork all in order and all that good stuff. And I do this every single year. And why do I do this to myself every year? Well, one reason, I'm not going to give up on myself. But secondly, I'm not really holding myself accountable. If I look inward, I'm not really taking the time and using the moments that I have to, in a wise way, in order to hold myself accountable to those goals. I set out a plan and then I don't act on it. Some of you may experience this with exercise. Exercise is a great one that I hear about all the time, especially being a fitness instructor. People that'll start off gung-ho at the beginning of the year, and they start to kind of loosen up on their own self-accountability. And over the course of the year, they kind of wane back away from the goal that they had set, and they don't end up accomplishing it. Another good one for me, I don't know if you guys have your cameras on, but this thing of water, I promise myself every day, I'm going to be accountable. I know I need to drink more water. I'm going to drink 2 of these a day. And look, this is my first bottle. So I'm just letting you guys know I'm not always accountable to myself. But this is a big thing, right? Like really being able to look inward and analyze how you're talking to yourself. And then are you being accountable to yourself? And are you doing the things that are going to set you up for success? If being hydrated is my definition of success, what am I doing in order to set myself up for that success? And if you are good at these 2 things, if you can get to the point where you are good at these 2 things, it's going to ultimately lead to building your self-confidence. In fact, if you can master these 2 things, you're going to be the most self-confident version of yourself that you can possibly be. I mean, and if you think about it, if you think about times when you have followed through on a goal, and let's go back to exercise, where you did exercise consistently over several weeks. And like, how did that make you feel? And how does that accountability kind of fuel itself and lead not only to self-confidence, but better self-accountability, better self-talk? This is kind of a cyclical process or a cyclical system. If I have really good self-talk and then I hold myself accountable to the goals I set and I build my self-confidence is going to fuel more positive self-talk that helps lead me to be more accountable and ultimately yield in more self-confidence, and the cycle continues, right? So ultimately, at the end of the day, we just got to get the ball rolling, right? We just need to get something going and get this started. So how can we do that? How can we start getting this ball or this wheel turning? And so I'd like to take a moment here to just pause and give you guys a second to go into the chat again and offer some of your own advice. What are some things that we can do, positive self-talk, to help us get this ball started or get this wheel started? And I'm going to throw another link up here. Emily, you can share it in the chat as well. This is a link to an article about positive self-talk. And come on, guys, you guys can throw some stuff into the chat. What are some things that you can say to yourself to give yourself some coaching, some positive energy to move forward? I'll give you guys a second. You have to be your own, awesome, Ashton. You have to be your own hype person. Remind yourself of what you have accomplished. That's fantastic. Like, think back to the good stuff, right? Think back to the wins that you've had, the successes that you've had. Like, use that as the fuel that's going to help you drive that wheel, that's going to help you keep that wheel turning. Now, if you go to that link, they had some pretty good points, I thought. Being just able to identify the negative talk and stop it, right? Put a pause, like, know when you're doing it, and then stop yourself, which is hard. That's not an easy task, but stopping yourself, checking in with those feelings. Another point that they put in that article was to find the humor. I think this is an awesome idea. When you make a mistake, or when something doesn't go exactly to plan, try to find the humor in the situation rather than kind of beating yourself down with negative self-talk. Well, that was a learning experience. Don't do that again. Find ways to build some humor into it and take away something positive from it. Find the silver lining, if you will. Another great point that they bring in there, or put in that article, is about finding positive people to surround yourself with. If you have a whole bunch of negative people and negative energy around you, that's going to almost fuel the negativity inside your head as well. So try to find those people that are positive. Let me look at some of the chats. Katie, be assertive can add value. Anna, remember that everything you learn, even through error, only makes you better. Fantastic. Tanya says, when I'm being challenged by people and feel they're trying to make me feel like I don't know what I'm doing, I remind myself that they are pushing me. That's a fantastic way to make a negative into a positive. Exactly. Jenny says, if you can't talk positive to yourself, get with a good friend that'll help get you. And that's a fantastic one. Not only, try to find ways to give yourself positive affirmations, but again, surround yourself by people that are going to also give you positive affirmations, that are going to tell you how awesome you are and remind you how awesome you are. So these are great ways to help you really try to turn that wheel and begin the process of building better self-confidence. And I think the second thing would be, of course, how can we do better at self-accountability? What are the ways or the pathways to help us build a process to better self-accountability? So this is not, self-talk is certainly part of that, but what are some other things that we can do? And again, use the chat, throw some of your own ideas in there. And I'm going to throw up another QR code. And Emily, you can share the link for this in the chat as well, for those that are interested. But self-accountability, I'll tend to lean towards fitness examples, but I think this is kind of a generic example that applies to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So it could be fitness, it could be related to, drinking water was the example I gave you earlier. Maybe journaling, how do you keep yourself accountable to, giving yourself time to journal. So, I mean, could be all sorts of different things that you're trying to hold yourself accountable for. But when I talk in the realm of fitness, usually, when I have people come to me asking questions related to fitness and how can I do better, or what can I do, how many days should I work out, I'm usually telling them to pull it back, especially if you don't exercise and you're coming into and you're going to start exercising. Don't go with the expectation you're going to exercise 7 days a week. You're going to burn yourself out. It's not going to, you're going to end up creating negativity for yourself because you're not going to be successful. And ultimately, that's would be my wish for you, is to be successful. So whether it's fitness or or getting a new job, or drinking more water, whatever it is that you're trying to do, start small. Start small. Start with, rather than saying I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to walk for an hour. Like start small. Don't overcomplicate things. And then set goals. And part of setting goals is setting a schedule, a plan. If I want to hold myself accountable for being more organized, I can't just make a general statement that I'm going to be more organized. I need to start with a specific goal. I'm going to be more organized about filing my paperwork. Be very specific. And then say, I'm going to, every Sunday, I'm going to do this specific task, and I'm going to set aside these 2 hours to do that specific task, and then do that, right? Like you make it part of your schedule. If you were to look at my calendar, you would see that I have workouts it's planned as part of my day. I have meeting, exercise, or exercise, meeting, depending on the day. But that's like part of my schedule. And so it's part of my routine. It's not something I skip over, just like I wouldn't not show up to a meeting. No, it's in my calendar. It's something I do. I follow that calendar. So creating a schedule, rewarding yourself. Another great one in the fitness world is having a partner, an accountability partner. Can you translate that into your job? I go back to like what Jenny was saying about, finding somebody that helps give you positive affirmations. Can that person also help you be accountable towards your goal? Having that buddy system. I'm going to go back and see if there's some chats that I've missed. Break your goals down into smaller steps so that they're easier to check off. Absolutely. That's a fantastic one. Again, keep it simple. Make yourself successful, because you want to find those moments where you can reward yourself. And a reward doesn't have to be something physical, right? The reward can be the accomplishment of having accomplished whatever that task is, no matter how small it is. You can do anything for 15 minutes. I love that. Just get started. Absolutely. It's just a matter of starting. And so if you could set that time aside. So for example, if you find yourself just bogged down at work and you're not able to keep up with your emails, let's say, and your accountability goal is to be able to keep up with your emails, maybe that's what you need to do. You need to set aside 15 minutes at the start of your day before all the chaos begins to kind of clean out some emails. And maybe you do it again at the end of the day. Maybe it's more than 15 minutes. But if you start with 15 minutes, that gets you rolling, right? I love that goal. Identify pain points that are holding you back. This is one from Sam. Setting me back from doing something I want to do, and then I think of what to eliminate. Oh, that's fantastic. So not just how you're going to get there, but how do you eliminate the obstacles that are preventing you from that progress, from that forward momentum? Offsetting those pain points with something positive. Big on lists. Amber is big on lists. I too love the lists. I try my best to make realistic goals on the day, write it down. Some things get thrown in that are unexpected, and I have to remember that's okay. And I think that's a really good point too. You got to be willing to kind of move with the ebb and flow of that tide, because it's always going to be changing. Jenny Scott, eat that elephant one bite at a time. I know I've loved that phrase. And I use it a lot. I'll say, if you haven't heard that phrase before, how do you eat an elephant? Because a lot of times that's what it feels like we're trying to tackle, right? We're trying to tackle an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? Like, don't look at the big picture. Just deal with the small components, one task at a time. Tanya uses a leader's standard work, listing out per day. Awesome. These are all great ideas. Thank you. So, these are some common mistakes. I'm calling them mistakes that, and maybe they're tendencies, not so much mistakes, but these are 3 things that I feel like tend to be those obstacles towards you being able to, gain that self-confidence, have the positive talk, fulfill those self-accountability goals. So one of them being uncertainty, timidness, and then being overly apologetic. And the first two, I think, kind of almost go hand in hand. And these are a lot of times the things that prevent you from, being one to speak up, right? And so maybe it is self-talk, for example, that is holding you back and making you feel uncertain and timid in a situation where you're trying to be heard and be seen. And then the third point, I think, is one, once you finally do gain the confidence to speak up, I feel like this is another one where, and I don't know if it's more of a female thing. I feel like it maybe is, but where you have a tendency to lead with an apology. And maybe for some of you that resonates, for some of you it may not. But these are certainly all three things that I've done and find myself doing still today and catch myself trying to do or be better at, being more certain, feeling less timid, being less apologetic. So when I talk about uncertainty, I'm talking about, the things that hold you back from, being able to speak up and say something. And I think back to, I think it was fourth grade. I had this great teacher. Her name was Mrs. Boone. And she made a statement in class one day where she said, and it was early in the year, she said, "Don't be afraid to ask questions. No question is a bad question." And my little fourth grade brain at that time took that message, took those words, and like embedded them into my very being, right? And I became known and still am known today as a question asker. And people will poke fun at me. I always ask a lot of questions. And again, I think back to Mrs. Boone and I think no question is a bad question. But I can promise you, as good as I am at asking questions, there are so many times when I hold back. I know there are times when I hold back, especially if I'm in a situation where I do have thoughts or feelings, that whole imposter syndrome, where I don't necessarily feel like I'm an expert in the room or somebody that has, the credentials to be speaking up. Maybe I just am afraid to ask the question. And again, uncertainty and timidness tend, for me at least, they seem they are kind of aligned on some level. But when I think about uncertainty, I think about situations where I've been in like a meeting with a bunch of colleagues and we're talking about whatever it is that we're talking about. And, I have an idea, I have a suggestion, and I don't say it because I'm afraid of what other people might think. Maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe they're going to think it's stupid. But then lo and behold, somebody else in the meeting had the same idea, just like Miss Boone said they would. And they speak up and they look like this hero, right? Like everybody's like, "Oh, that was a great idea, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I missed an opportunity to say something because I was too uncertain." Why was I so uncertain? Was it an uncertainty in me? Was it an uncertainty in my knowledge of the topic? What was holding me back? And then of course, timidness could be a component of that, right? Where perhaps you're just shy. I know that's, for me personally, I tend to be more of an introvert. And so, it takes a lot of gumption for me to speak up when I'm not speaking in this kind of a scenario where I'm being asked to speak about something. So I will do a whole lot of listening before I will jump in. And it'll even have me or cause me to not ask questions. So rather than asking a question that I know probably other people have, I won't speak up for the fear that maybe the question is going to make me look dumb, or I don't want to seem like I don't know. whatever it is, more about the topic that we're talking about. So I just don't say anything, which is also not good, right? Like it's not leading me down the path that I want to go down. And then on the flip side, when you do find the confidence to finally speak up and you start off with something along the lines of, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry. I didn't hear you say that. I'm sorry. I must have misinterpreted what you said. I'm sorry. I was so busy with this other project that I wasn't able to get to the task that you asked me to do. And I don't remember if it was Mrs. Boone or if it was a different teacher, but I remember it was in I think it was in grade school when we were writing papers, and I had a teacher that was particularly well, they just didn't like the word get. Get, get. Did you get the mail? Did you get my email? I'm gonna go get groceries. Do you get me? She hated the word get. And I remember that vividly. And so whenever we wrote any papers for her, we would, if we used the word get, she would cross it off, and then we would have to come up with another word in place of get. So instead of did you get my email, I would say, did you receive my email? I'm going to get groceries. I'm going to go buy groceries. Did you get me? Do you understand me? So she would make us rewrite everything. And this is kind of how I approach this whole I'm sorry. I'll find that I'll even do it in emails, but also in conversation where I'll lead with, or I want to lead with, I am sorry. And, this is one where I feel like, again, if we could just pause for a second and say, is an apology really necessary in this moment? Ideally, we don't want to lead with an apology because it kind of puts you in a position, I don't want to say of weakness, but it puts you in that position where it seems like you're trying to make up for something, which maybe you are, maybe there is a need for an apology, but a lot of times I feel like that's an overly used word. So I would ask, what are some of the things you guys think are holding you back? Is it uncertainty, timidness, apologies? Maybe it's none of these things. Maybe you have a whole other list of things that are holding you back. Maybe it's these things plus more things that are holding you back. Anybody have some other ideas of things they've either seen or things they know they do themselves that kind of prevent them from? I'm going to give you guys a second to throw something into the chat. I was just in a presentation earlier this week, and they used a lot of chat too. And it took me a second every single time to get my thoughts in order and to get my fingers to work. So I found I was not up. Good. Fear or failure, fear, absolutely. So those kind of run in line with the timidness, right? Fear of failure specifically. And that's kind of a tricky one. I mean, you got to give yourself permission to fail, to not always win. But I think it's also important that the culture of the place that you work has that same kind of mindset, right? Like it goes a long way if your manager and if your company that you work for also have that same perspective where failure is not necessarily a bad thing, right? We learn from those failures and we're able to grow from that. Not wanting to appear aggressive, that's another fantastic one. So maybe it's holding you back because you don't want to seem pushy or bossy. These might be some other words that I kind of feel fit in with being aggressive. Not win, what? Awesome. Right. So, I mean, everybody probably has their own things in your head. I feel like those are three that I see a lot. And if I were to give three pieces of advice, these would be the three things that I think are, and I'm looking at the time. Oh man, boy, the time went fast. Emily's probably freaking out. But these would be the three pieces of advice that I would give you. Seek knowledge. Don't be afraid to get dirty, and press pause. Seek knowledge. Don't be afraid to get dirty, and press pause. These are the three takeaways, in fact, that I want you to leave with today. So like when you go into a meeting, do whatever it is you can to prepare for that meeting, right? Seek knowledge. If you want to, let's say you want to advance in your career and you want to stand out and you want to be different, go out and seek the knowledge that's going to allow you to get the experience that you need. So maybe it's reading articles, maybe it's doing, maybe it's finding a mentor that has that skill or that knowledge. Maybe it's taking a class, but go out and seek the knowledge that you need, find the experts, and then don't be afraid to do the work. So when I say get dirty, don't be afraid to put a little sweat equity into things and earn it. Because ultimately that's what usually it takes is to really get to that next level, is being willing to get dirty. And then take a second to press pause and just allow yourself to think before you react. And this can be especially important before you respond and, you know, for example, say, I'm sorry. Is an apology really warranted? Could I not put I'm sorry at the beginning of it and just say the latter part of that sentence and it still be an honest reflection of what needs to be said? You know, so if you can do these three things, I think it'll go a long way towards helping you, you know, elevate yourself. Now, these were some articles, and in fact, Jenny Scott found these articles and shared them with me. So I'm going to share three of them, and Emily, if you can throw them down into the chat as well. These are great links to help you explore what some other women, these are other successful women in other industries, not in the print industry, but in any industry. And this would go across the board. You know, it's not something unique to the, you know, print process or print industry or the flexo industry. But Michelle Succo says, well, she says a couple different things, which I think reflect some of the points that I had made earlier. But that number 3 there, being able to accept that you're going to fail and that's okay. I think that's a really big one. But this is a great article that you should check out. Forbes had another great article talking about, again, some of the same things, focus on the positive. I think this group that you're talking with right now, the women of Flexo, is a great example of a group of women that are going to support you. So becoming parts of these kinds of groups, maybe a group within your company where you can feel like you're with other people like you and that are going to help lift you. And like, you know, Jenny's point, are going to give you those positive affirmations and help coach you towards the goals. Finding role models, but I think number 4 in this one is even more important, or not more important, but as important, is seek out men as well. Men are not the enemies. And I think that's one thing that I definitely want everybody to come out of this understanding is it's not you against or women against men in this situation. We are women in a male-dominated industry, but a lot of these men are our allies. And they are willing to help us and lift us and coach us. So not only finding female role models within your company or within your social network, but also other men that will be there for you as well. And I can list off dozens easily. And the last one here is from Inc., where they're talking about 10 powerful ways. So each one of these kind of gets more and more I guess, lengthy in ways that you can become more successful in a male-dominated world. But a few of these kind of fall in line with seeking knowledge. Become a person of value. Don't just wait for things to happen for you. Don't wait to be discovered, is what I like to say. Don't wait for somebody to discover you. Go out and put yourself in front of situations, get skills, get knowledge that's going to help you stand out. Some of these also speak to some of those things related to timidness and uncertainty, the fear of really speaking up, and trying to work towards building your confidence. And if you're building your confidence, you're going to do that through the self-talk, and you're going to do that through the self-accountability. Pressing pause. So, in this particular article, they're talking about, stop trying to be a pleaser, learn how to handle conflict. And I'm saying don't lead with the apology. Try to find another way to say it, unless an apology is really needed. And then finding women and men that can help guide you through this whole process. And I'd hope to have a little bit more time to leave you guys an opportunity to jump in with some other things. I think we had some good discussions in the chat, though. My ultimate goal is hopefully we've set you up with some ideas and suggestions for how, and articles and things that you can reference to help you take it to that next level. We want to relieve that anxiety, the fear, dissipate some of that frustration. So ultimately you go into these situations feeling confident and feeling like you can speak up and do whatever it takes to help you shimmy to the top, and become seen and become heard. So if I can leave you with anything today, you hold the reins to your future. You hold the reins. So I can't stress enough that you got to start by looking inward for that self-confidence. I think this is a big component of what helps you lift yourself up and help yourself be more seen, is just what are you saying in your own head? And what are you doing to hold yourself accountable? And then how are you going out there to learn? What are you doing to help enforce? And then taking some moments to pause and reflect and think about the things that you're saying before you say them, whether it's an apology to someone else or if it's the negative self-talk in your own head. So with that, I appreciate everybody jumping in. Again, I want to cycle back to say this is not just like a pathway to success in a male-dominated workforce. I really feel like this is something that resonates for any work experience, to include, social aspects and, other things that you're doing in your life. So I hope this was helpful, and I appreciate you guys jumping in with the chat. And with that, Emily, did you want to jump back on?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I know we're a little bit over on time, and I wanted to remind everyone that this will be recorded. So, Kat, if you have a couple minutes and you want to answer some Q&A, if there are any questions from the group, I think we're okay on time for a couple more minutes. I understand that some people may be jumping off too, but yeah, number one, great job. Like I love this messaging, and I think that it's something that everyone can take something from. It's everything that we talk about, I feel like, is just people related stuff.
Yeah, isn't it? I feel like a lot of this is not necessarily about men and women or any of that. It's just about, respecting yourself and finding value in yourself. And, I don't know, sometimes, if somebody comes to me and gives me a compliment, I think one of the hardest things for me to do is to just say thank you. And not come up with an excuse as to why, oh, you don't have to thank me, I'm not that great, blah blah blah. Just to say, you know what, thanks, man, that was awesome, I really appreciate you saying something nice to me.
Yep.
And then being able to internalize that. And I kind of think other people are the same way. If you can just stop and say, I'm awesome. That's going to help you build that self-confidence. And you got to be a big component of your own self-confidence. You can't wait for other people to build that for you.
Absolutely. And the self-accountability piece of it, like I think that really comes into play, right? Like every time you try is a good thing.
Right. Yeah. I'm not giving up on my goal to get organized. Every year I make like a microscopic improvement and I'm going, it's a win. It's a win, even if it's not where I, had the vision of being. But yeah.
Well, from anyone on the call, attendees or panelists, anyone, if anyone has any questions, if you'd like to pop them into the chat or into the Q&A, wonderful. We'll, looks like just a bunch of thank yous and a lot of positivity and good feedback. So,
Well, I
uh,
thank everybody. Thank you
yeah.
guys for letting me jump on with you. It was fun.
I think it looks like we don't have any questions. I think the chat was a super fun option too. So I'm glad that we got some dialogue back and forth. And thank you to everyone that participated in that way.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I think with that, we'll wrap it up. But I just want to remind everyone that if you guys ever need anything, please do reach out. We love hearing from everyone and getting feedback on what people are interested in. And don't forget to check out the website and our LinkedIn as well.